Ladies and gentlemen,
Good afternoon.
please welcome the legendary Tony Emerson.
We're live. Good afternoon. My name is Jeff Cohen. This is the Topeka City Council Committee Policy and Finance Committee. This is July 29th, 2019 at 3 p.m. in the Holiday Building. I want to call this meeting to order. My name is Jeff Cohen. I'm the chair, and we have two council people here. You want to?
Brendan from District 6.
Tony Emerson with District 4.
I'll accept a motion to accept the minutes.
So moved.
Second.
Moved in second. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? Okay. Moving on, personnel code and TMC conclusion. We'll hand it over to you.
All right, thank you, Chair Cohen. I've put before you a little booklet that kind of summarizes the work that we've done to try to get what we believe needs to come out of the personnel code into the actual Topeka Municipal Code because it's more legislative in nature. So you'll see it's titled Revisions to TMC Title II. It's got all the personnel related provisions in it. And I can you'll see little tabs on the side. Catherine, if you wouldn't mind handing me the little table of contents piece. Yeah. As you guys will recall, or at least hopefully, if we didn't bore you too much and put you to sleep last time, we talked about how we were going to work with the code company that's going to do the recodification that occurs every 10 years. And we're going to work with them to try to restructure Title II. And their suggestion was to divide a portion of Title II up into three separate divisions. And one was just a more general division, and a third was a division that dealt with boards and commissions. And the division that they suggested with what we've been working with here today is Division 2 employees. So this is the division. This little outline will show you kind of what the various sections would be renumbered to if we did go that route and have a separate Division 2 into Title II. And so this book that you have in front of you with all of the tabs shows what this Division 2 would look like if it were placed in the code. So the very front page is like just kind of an index to show what the current code provisions are and what the proposed numbers would be. Mm-hmm. So we can use, the very first tab is 2.105. We can use that as an example. If you'll go to that, the first page you should see is a cover page. It'll show, it'll say current, it'll say what the current number is, what the current title is, what articles are under that current chapter, and then there'll be a hash line, and then under that is proposed. So it'll show what the proposed renumbered provision is, the proposed different name for that particular chapter, and then it'll kind of give just a very, very short explanation of kind of what is going on. Then you go to the next page, and there's going to be a separate sheet or two, depending on how many revisions were made as to the main notes, what we've done primarily with respect to this particular chapter. The first part we've tried to do under the notes piece is if there's any history behind the particular chapter. And for instance, on chapter, what would be the new 2.105, this talks about city hiring, and it says it consists of 10 sections, gives what those sections are, and it states that 6 of those sections have not been amended at any point in time since 1981, the last 38 years, and possibly longer. And then if sections were amended in that 40-year time period, then it will explain what those were. So you'll kind of know what's been amended, what's not, and what has been amended, what those amendments were, in a very nutshell, I guess, overview. Then under that solid line, it'll go in and explain actually what proposed revisions there are to this particular chapter. So in chapter 2.105, this is going to be the chapter that deals with employment practices. This is the one that deals with affirmative action, equal employment opportunity. So as you go through, you'll see a tracking version. We've shown it in, I think it comes up in blue, red in your documents actually. And then we've tried to put in, at the end of any section where there's something that needs to be said, we'll reiterate it again here in yellow highlight. So for instance, we deleted all of the definitions and we'll say they're deleted because they're redundant. They're going to be found elsewhere in the code. We don't need to keep putting them at various places. So you'll see that throughout the tracking version. And then if you keep turning back, you'll see a clean version. And this will show you what it will look like if it were restructured in the way that that's being proposed. And it has a cross-reference to what the former section number was. So for instance, in chapter 2.105, it's going to be employment practices, diversity and inclusion, where previously it was called affirmative action. And then it'll show what the cross-references are to the sections. And this goes on for each tab. You'll go to chapter 2.110. You'll see the cover page. You'll see the pages of notes. And this one has 2 pages of notes because there was a lot that was done. In this particular chapter, 2.110, this is the one where we put the vast majority of personnel code provisions that we thought were legislative and needed to be moved over. So those are all going to be found primarily in 2.110, some in 2.105. And then there's a separate, actually, while we're talking about that, I'm going to pass out these. This is, I know, there's a lot. And last time, Councilmember Jensen asked, how are we going to communicate this to the governing body when we get through it? These are some of the tools that we're going to use to try to make it as simple as possible. So what this is the personnel code provision, and you'll see where it has red. This shows you every single place where we moved it into the TMC. And then if you see green, it'll show every single place that it's already addressed in the personnel manual.
There's only one line on these 2 pages you didn't change. Patents and copyrights.
Yes.
Is it really that bad?
Well, a lot of it, you know, if you'll recall during the discussion, is already addressed in what we were using as administrative rules and regulations and policies. It was already addressed somewhere else. What we did was just combined all those and dumped them into that one document. So it just makes it a little bit easier to refer to where those are now. So you'll be able to see where every single one of those things are, and that's done, that's already in there. But the red language where it shows where this is going to show up in the TMC, that's kind of what this book will kind of, you know, help you with a little bit, hopefully. Go ahead. I think I heard somebody.
What?
Anybody have a question? Sorry.
No, go ahead.
So we have 2.115. Again, that's the union piece. 2.120. That's the civil service for police officers and firefighters. On that one, we didn't make too many changes at all. They're just changing personnel director to human resources director or city administrator to city manager. There weren't a lot of changes to this one. The biggest changes were in 105, 110. You'll see that that's really full of tracking changes. There's one kind of unanswered question at this point in time, and that's at tab 2.130. It's on the Firemen's Relief Association. That's what it's called now. We propose it be retitled to Firefighters Relief Association if we keep it, but we've been talking to the board members of that association, and they've indicated they didn't even know that this was in the code. They've never referred to the code to look for anything, to answer any of their questions. They always go to the state statute, because every single one of these provisions is already in the state statute. So we're talking with them about, you know, does it make sense for us to just delete this entire chapter 2 and take it out? So we're getting there. We're almost at a point where we're ready to decide, but it's most likely going to be just taken out in full. And then the most interesting part for all of us, I think, were these last tabs in 2.130. This is what we were talking to you about at our last meeting, where you had the 1939 retirement system. We're just going to take it out. It doesn't make any sense any longer. The Social Security, we've divided these up into separate articles so you can see them, a lot easier. Talking to the Department of Administration, they've advised us that we need to delete 3 entire sections out of this and revise another. So a lot of our research and calling and everything else has kind of proven fruitful. It's been really helpful to help us get this up to date and ready to go. So this shows you all the TMCs. You have the proposed table of contents, post recodification if we go with the Division 2 employees. You have the cross-reference on the personnel code showing where we propose it be in the TMC and where it already is in the personnel manual. So I think at this point in time, what we think needs to happen, at least, is that some kind of recommendation go up to the body as far as what do you all want us to send them? What do you want to send up to the body? What do you want to refer to them? In our mind, it is to get rid of this entire personnel code, just delete it. After the recodification occurs, you obviously want to move these into the TMC, but after that happens, I think this whole personnel code can be repealed, because after it's recodified, it will be in here, in the TMC, or it's already in the personnel manual. That's going to be one of our recommendations, and the reason I really think that's what we need to do is back to that conversation we had at the very first meeting on this back in April, when you turn to the first page of the Personnel Code, Article 1, Section 1, and it says, Charter Ordinance or Charter Section A2 dash, I don't know what it is, A2-3, calling for adoption of a comprehensive personnel system. That's still in the Personnel Code. That language does not exist. It hasn't existed for 15 years. It was repealed by the Charter Ordinance that was adopted post form of government change, and that new charter provision is A2-25A, and it says that the council has legislative authority, but it has no administrative authority. So that's why we really kind of think we've got to deal with this document.
When does recodification complete?
So what I've been told is about September, October timeframe is when Brenda's kind of going to get in earnest with them and kind of go through the rearranging, renumbering. So if you send up a recommendation to the governing body, whatever that is, and we can have a discussion potentially on August 20th, that meeting, we think we can, be in a position to have a discussion with them about it and the reasons why we think this would be a good idea. It should kind of flow kind of nicely with recodification piece, because you'll go, August, September, about the same time frame.
But what will we do with patents and copyrights? They're sort of left.
Can they be?
We could put that in the TMC. We just didn't know that there would really be a need to, so that's the only one we really didn't address out of the whole. Well, a lot of these have been addressed, like I said, 10 years ago through ARRs and policies. So it's not like we did all of this, but that's one we didn't think needed to be addressed. So.
Well, I'm inclined to support that.
Yep.
It looks pretty evident just in this 1-2 pager right here that it basically everything is moved. So, that's essentially solved the problem pending the recodification.
Well, it solves a problem with respect to the issue that we have with how the form of government changed, and we're kind of still, overlapping administrative with more legislative. But also, as we said before, it helps immensely with just having one less place to look when you're trying to figure out, all right, how are we going to handle this grievance, or how are we going to handle, this disciplinary action or this leave request. It just helps not having another extra spot to look to and to make sure that it all matches up. Because right now, there's a lot of things that don't make any sense at all. You've got provisions in the TMC that people didn't even know were there. You've got provisions in the TMC right now that, just aren't in effect. So I guess that's kind of where we're coming from. But obviously that's your decision, and, we've kind of gotten everything done and ready to go, if that's the direction you want to go on these last pieces where you have the red ink and it talks about TMC. I mean, that's really kind of the last piece of it.
Councilman Emerson, do you have anything to add?
No, I do not. I would also support that, though.
So what would the recommendation then be from the committee to the council?
Don't ask how the sausage is made. That the sausage has been
Oh, no, that's going to,
Yeah, it's,
I would say, first off, that you would want to get the TMC revised and updated as set out in this book. So that's one piece of it. The other piece of it is to obviously repeal the ordinance that implemented adopted the personnel code and get rid of that part of it. And I think we're kind of there after that. The personnel manual already exists. It's already been used. It's in effect right now.
Does that put us in any kind of limbo until the recodification process is complete, or would we repeal it pending that process being approved?
I think we will work in conjunction with them.
Okay.
And
so the timing falls.
yes, I think we could work in conjunction with them.
Okay.
Okay. Is anybody willing to make a recommendation to the council of the changes
So
here and repeal the personnel code?
Second?
Okay. All those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Motion passes.
So that's the recommendation we'll send up, and then obviously there'll be another discussion with the body and see what their thoughts are as well. And I will tell you, as we talked about last time, we will set up meetings with any of the council members who wish to talk one-on-one, because I know a few of them will want to, and that's absolutely perfectly fine with us. And we'd actually like that.
Right.
To happen ahead of time, because, you know, it's a lot of information, and
then
that's a lot to dump on somebody and have them
Include a
discuss.
link to the last meeting video that we, or the meeting videos that we did.
Yeah.
So they can get caught up on the
Yes.
discussion that happened.
And we will attach all of the meeting minutes to the agenda item, and so it should be, it'll provide a lot of information, hopefully, to them, but there's nothing like sitting down and talking face-to-face sometimes on things, so we're absolutely happy to do that as well.
Very good. The next item is old business term limits. And what are we gonna do with this? Anybody?
I mean, I'm inclined to push it out for a public vote. You know, we talked about the presidential election coming up in 2020. We could propose a question similar to this without incurring a substantial cost, and just ask folks, you know, what they want. You know, I don't feel like it's my right to take away their right to vote for somebody, but if that's something that they want to give up to ensure that change occurs, then, you know, I'm inclined to give them the opportunity to tell us. I know there's been some discussion back and forth in the community about this over the course of the past few decades. So this would be the definitive ask. You know, just like when we tried to decide whether or not what form of government we wanted, it eventually went to a public vote and they told us. So.
Councilman Emerson?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. My own personal thoughts on this are that, every 4 years we have they get to vote on term limits. You know, I mean, you're having one this year.
That's right.
I am as well. I just, the council members I think have been around for a long time. That we have a couple that have been around for a long time, and I think they've been around because they work their butts off for their district and for the city. And personally, I'd hate to see some artificial deadline mean that those people can no longer represent their districts if that's what their constituents want. So I am not in favor of doing anything that would cost money. On the other hand, if there is, I think Brendan, you kind of mentioned doing it during the presidential election, and there
That's
would be
when the
no
highest turnout
cost,
is.
and there would be no cost for us to do it at that time.
If you look at the
correct?
estimated cost for the general election ballot for November of 2020, it's an estimated $0.
Yeah, I guess my question would be, we couldn't just kind of take a poll of them at that. It would be a vote of whether or not you wanted them or not. And again, if that's the will, if that's what the will of the people want, I'm all for it. But I'm personally am not in favor of it because I think we already have it. And you saw last time a couple council members, they kind of set their own term limits, if you will, by getting off after. Case of Richard, it was after a couple terms, I think, and Elaine after one term. So, well, and you.
Well, and so the only argument for term limits that I've heard from folks is there's the power of the incumbency that sometimes disproportionately affects how elections go, and it's very difficult to unseat an incumbent, and so oftentimes that creates issues. Now, I don't think the current council we have any kind of these problems now, but who's to say what would happen in the future? So, and that's why I say, if anything, I certainly wouldn't support us making a decision on the behalf of people. For me to support it, it would have to be a public ballot initiative for them to actually make up their own minds how they want to do it.
Okay. Why couldn't this be done in 2019, this fall, in just a few months?
The deadline is, I think, August 23rd.
Well, it's only part of the city. Because not all districts are up. The odd districts aren't. No one's voting for the odd districts, so there's no election.
But they have school board at-large votes still this fall fall.
Oh, I understood there were some districts that didn't have any elections, but I could be wrong. The turnout's going to be rather low, unfortunately, for this election, as opposed to the presidential election. Is why I advocate for that.
Certainly. Okay.
So.
Would you like to make a recommendation that we send this to the council to put on the ballot for 2020?
I'd be happy to send it up to them to discuss.
I'll second that.
Okay.
Well, all we're doing is forwarding this to the council for discussion.
Yeah. This has nothing to do with anybody that's on the council, but what this does is it brings new ideas to the table of people that really haven't been influenced by lobbyists in the community. And I think it allows newly elected officials to have more influence when they get on, because everybody's kind of been, termed over. But I think this also could encourage people to vote because they know that so-and-so's always going to get elected.
The other thing I will add is every nonprofit board I've ever served on has had term limits.
Why do they do that?
Just to roll over so you get new eyes, fresh blood. So I find it interesting when I got into politics that there weren't any term limits when all of the other nonprofits I've ever been a part of, all the other boards I've ever been a part of, have always had. You're on for a certain number of terms, and then you have to rotate off for a while, and then you can come back.
Right.
And there's a number of reasons why you do that. It keeps people fresh. And in politics, I think we should have the same thing, always bringing new people in. Now, granted, do you force that, or do you let it naturally happen through attrition? That's the argument at hand here. But I always have thought it was a good idea to bring in new people. I think the council's done an excellent job of that through the ebb and flow, but this just sets up some standard policies for that.
Councilman Emerson, I'm going to call a vote. Do you want to have anything to say?
No, and obviously this can pass 2-1. That's not a problem. I just again, a kind of further thing is that if you're just say if it was 2 terms and you're in your second term, you become a lame duck basically, right? So if you're really trying to affect change in your second term and people know you aren't running again, that you just lose some of your not credibility, but
know exactly how that feels.
Yes. So like I said, I'm, I will be in opposition, but I totally understand, and the points you guys brought up are very valid. So,
thank you. So we have a motion and a second, and all those in favor of sending this to the council, say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed?
nay.
Thank you. does pass.
Barely.
Are there any other items before the committee? You know, being the Policy and Finance Committee is kind of an interesting position where you actually get to make recommendations for change. And was everything okay? Okay. I was thought maybe. Where, you know, there may be some of our constituents have specific needs. For example, had one where they had we had a noise ordinance pass for a specific thing and passed for noise amplification, but yet they just blew the roofs off all the neighbors' houses. I mean, it was just beyond, you know, what you would think to be just noise amplification. So, you know, are there any things that we would need to look at this year while we're here with related to some just specific issues that people may have?
Mr. Chair, was this, so we gave someone an exemption from it as one of our normal things?
Right.
And it went extreme?
And they just cranked it up, and then when the police showed up, they were yelling over the microphone, "We have a permit, we have a permit," and they could be heard, you know, a mile and a half away. And it's nothing against the event, it's just, you know, when we do give a noise amplification thing, is there some limitation to, you know, how loud you can crank it up on a, you know what I mean? And it's not just specifically that, but it's just anything that policy related that we would need to look at.
Well, and the other thing to consider is certain types of sound travel different distances. You know, low bass will travel much further than, you know, some of the higher frequencies out there. And so, and right now we just have a blanket approval for all of it. And we also don't include values to, you know, how many decibels it can be. So, I mean, if you get an approval, I mean, correct me if I'm wrong, I'm looking at the legal staff, but my understanding is you can be essentially as loud as technology or whatever you're doing will allow. We don't really specify.
Yeah, and it's not just specifically that, but it's just, you know, are there any other just specific needs that, you know, our constituents do need?
We had talked, Councilmember Cohen, we'd talked about the decibel issue and the noise issue, and the police department was not inclined to do the decibel piece because it's just they just don't have the instrumentation to go out and measure. So, but what they do.
That's not a good excuse, though. That equipment is not expensive.
Well, what they do is it's complaint driven. So if they receive a complaint, they talk to the individual, and it's like a reasonable sensibilities type analysis. So you could still be cited for disturbing the peace or something like that if it would be loud enough to disturb the reasonable sensibilities of a reasonable person. Because, you know, as you know, with neighbors sometimes we've had a couple of complaints where a neighbor will call on the other neighbor because they don't like each other. And when the police officers go to the scene and they, you know, see what's happening, they're like, okay, well, this isn't something that would disturb the reasonable sensibilities of a typical person out in the community. So it's just a neighbor
Well, but part of the
argument.
frustration of citizens, though, is that that's arbitrary. You know, it's the opinion of an individual. And oftentimes that gets us into trouble because it's someone's opinion versus another. You know, the opinion of a Harley rider is going to be completely different than a mom pushing a stroller. And so now we're getting into where there's no standard when it's an arbitrary interpretation, and sound meters are not expensive.
Well, and Councilmember Jensen, we had that very issue with the noise with Mr. Riley. And
Yeah.
yeah.
It's not just noise. I had a customer, they are customers really, constituent that they live in a kind of a private gated community, and they have a box and a common backyard space where all the utilities come out of. And, you know, I think they're supposed to go below ground, but yet Cox was stringing the cable line across the grass, and they were having to mow around this. And of course, you could see through the years that it looks like they'd kind of push it down and then it would come right back and wash out. And there was really nothing that we could point at to say, you know, we need you to do this utility, whatever it is, and you're not doing it. And I think that was something that we didn't have any ammunition. We were able to call them, and we took pictures, sent them pictures, and of course they ended up trenching those lines. But it's something that, maybe if we had something up front that would require a little bit of common sense, when.
Well, we talked about some of those things as part of the broadband initiative, and that how, technology cables should be laid and where and that sort of thing. So maybe that fits into that
Okay.
discussion.
Okay.
Well, and Mr. Chair, and I think if we're going to delve into that area, I guess two things. First of all, I think there's a lot of federal legislation that kind of govern that stuff, so I don't know to what extent we can dictate things, but to the extent we can, I will tell you, like in the construction of our streets and infrastructure here, there's a huge problem with a company will go and lay either a communication cable or maybe some sort of communication cable, say, and they will take up a huge portion of the right of way because they're not very careful about how their contractor puts it in. And then the city's going through trying to build a new street or something, and it's a huge headache and may delay a project for a year. So if there is a way we can regulate that, I would ask that we may be looking to regulating also the corridors they can go down, where they might be placed, like in a street right of way. Maybe they're always, 10 feet behind the curb or something. So when the city needs to put in a storm sewer or a new water main or something, that utility is out of the way.
Okay, well, that's good. Is that something we can entertain talking about later?
Yes.
Do we need to have a motion at the council level to send that down to here?
I think we can start
initiate.
anything we want
Okay.
here.
Well, I would ask that we invite Gina Millsap to the next meeting then, because she has been instrumental in organizing a lot of the broadband stuff, and part of the work that we have done over there is eventually needs to come to the council for looking at how, when we do a dig once policy for infrastructure, that we put in communications cable or conduit for that, and a lot of that ties exactly into, we want you to put, a divided conduit, 4-channel conduit down so that it's ready to go when you need to add something, as opposed to let's dig up everything again to add an additional piece of fiber. So I would encourage us to involve her, because that work perfectly dovetails into a lot of that conversation, and it was something that would be brought to the council anyway to have a vote on. It might be easy enough just to combine those two into one motion and send up.
Oh, that's great.
And then also, Mr. Chair, then also perhaps some people from engineering, city engineer or and public works, because this is something they see every single day.
Oh, I'm sure.
Yep.
Okay. Very good. Very good.
Yep,
Great
I would
ideas.
absolutely
Thank you.
support that.
Okay. Are there any other items before this committee?
Councilmember Cohen, part of the discussion that we were just having was when you have the discussion with the governing body on the term limit issue and talking about sending that to the presidential election in November of 2020, do you want us to propose the same type of form charter that we had talked about previously, which is you can't serve any more than two or three consecutive terms, and you can sit out and then run again after a period of time after you've I mean, do you want to do that, or do you want to just have a, free-for-all discussion about it, about what people would like to see? I mean, when we originally talked about it, we had drafted that type of ordinance. And it basically said that, anybody who's previously.
Was it 2 terms or 3 terms? What was the
you know,
decision there?
Yeah, I
2
thought it was 2 on,
terms.
1 off.
And then, yes, one 4-year term you had to be off, and then you could
And
run
run
again
again.
after that 4 years. I just didn't know what.
Yeah, I like that. Let's,
do you wanna use that one?
provide that, and we'll pass that out at the meeting.
Okay.
I think that would be good.
So
Good
when we do,
conversation starter, if nothing else.
Certainly.
Okay. We'll make that part of the committee report.
I wouldn't have
then.
said 2 terms. I would think I would have said 3 terms.
We could do 3 on, 1 off.
Either way, I like the 2. I like to start off the conversation there.
Okay.
Yeah, I think that would be better. Thank you.
Yeah, we can get Emerson to support it as long as it includes a lifetime appointment for him, right?
Yeah, right.
Okay. Any other items before the committee?
Motion to adjourn.
Okay, we are adjourned.
Good job as always, sir.
Thank you.